Hello and welcome to The Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm your friendly neighborhood guest host, Brandon Weichert. Emerald's out on assignment for LindellTV in the nation's capital today. She will be back with you bright and early tomorrow. But let's just first dive into what's going on in the world. We hear a lot about the Middle East. We hear a lot about what's going on with China. But the silent war that's been going on for more than we like to think about for 3 years now is the Ukraine war. President Trump entered office on a promise that he would end that war with Russia on day one. And he used the fact that he was very close with Vladimir Putin. And indeed, he was probably one of the best presidents for Russian-American relations since Reagan was our president. And yet there has been no significant peace since the beginning of the Trump administration. Of course, we didn't really believe he was going to get peace on day one. Literally, we just thought that meant once he got into power, President Trump would be working overtime to get this war that has cost us so much for so long over as quickly as he could. But now we're now 7 months into the Trump administration, and not only has there been no movement toward peace, there's now also movement toward war. So we've gone from jaw to war. If you guys could put up clip number 1 of the Ukraine map we've got. My sources are reporting that Russian forces are advancing near Donetsk, Kharkov, and Zaporizhia. And those are 3 very important frontline areas in Ukraine. The Russians are sending about 160,000 troops into the fray. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, even with all of the help they've received from NATO, and Trump has authorized more aid to the Ukrainians now, which is sort of running against what he had said he was going to do. Even with all of that assistance that the United States and NATO has rendered Ukraine, it looks like the Russians' coming summer offensive is going to be leveraging concentrated artillery and drone strikes to basically break Ukrainian supply lines, which are becoming very brittle at the front. They have very long supply chains, as well as to basically attack defensive positions. In the last several years, since the war began, the Ukrainian lines have hardened into these sort of defensive World War I type trenches. The Russians have done something similar, but now the war seems to be shifting where Russia is taking the offensive for the first time in a long time. If you guys go to get ready for clip number 2, I'm just going to set it up real quick. President Trump talked about recently why he's reversing course on his previous promises. He's pinning all the blame on Vladimir Putin, and of course, Vladimir Putin is very difficult to deal with. The Russians notoriously are. Having said that, though, here's what President Trump said about dealing with Putin. Clip number 2, please, guys.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
And that is why Trump is saying now he's reversing course and flooding weapons. Weapons, by the way, that we don't really have in abundance anymore after the Israeli-Iran war. This is not a good position to be in if you're the United States, because we've now gone below war reserve status. Also, Trump commented recently again on his negotiations with Putin. Greg, why don't you roll clip number 3 from Fox News, please?
But I am very disappointed with President Putin. I thought he was somebody that meant what he said, and he'll talk so beautifully, and then he'll bomb people at night. We don't like that.
Now, why don't you have clip number 4 rolling while I speak? The issue right now is takes 2 to tango, as everybody here knows. The American people, notably the MAGA voters, really don't want the United States embroiled in yet another major war, this time a proxy war that could become a direct war with nuclear-armed Russia. President Trump, all throughout the campaign, acknowledged this reality. He's now reversing that course. He's blaming Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is difficult to deal with, yes, but there is another side to the story, unfortunately, which indicates that, in fact, Putin is merely responding to what he perceives to be provocations, not only from the United States, but from NATO as well. You'll remember in May of this year, as his envoy, Steve Witkoff, was meeting with the Russians in Turkey, somebody, wink, tried to attack Vladimir Putin's presidential helicopter. That, of course, prompted a direct and immediate, devastating retaliatory strike from the Russians. Mr. Trump, though, was apparently not briefed on that attack on Putin's helicopter, and he famously walked out the next day and announced that Trump was behaving like a maniac, and he attacked, Putin was behaving like a maniac. He attacked Putin in the American press, which went viral. He then, 24 hours later, had to acknowledge that actually he had not been briefed by his intelligence community on the attempted assassination of Vladimir Putin. And several weeks thereafter, as envoys from both Russia and the United States were again set to meet and try to resolve this thing peacefully, or as peacefully as possible, again, the Ukrainians then launched a sudden and surprise attack on Russian strategic bomber forces deep inside Russia using drones. And it has since been determined, according to my sources, that absolutely U.S. and NATO targeting analysts were used to help target those Russian nuclear bombers. It was an attempt by Ukraine not only to stop the negotiations occurring between the Trump administration and the Putin government, but it was also an attempt to basically send a signal to Moscow that NATO is still in this fight when we probably should not be. So this is what's going on in the European front of whatever you want to call this ongoing quasi-war, quasi-world war. President Trump, it seems, is constantly being forced by, forces inimical to peace to constantly negate his campaign promises and to escalate wherever he should be de-escalating. There seems to be some belief among the Trump administration, and they are right to believe this, but I think ultimately this is the wrong path personally. They clearly believe that by escalating, they will gain greater leverage over the Russians in terms of a potential negotiated settlement to the war. But just looking at the way the Russians are massing their forces, the surge of 160,000 additional troops, the surge of equipment, etc., it seems to indicate that actually the Russians really do have tactical advantages on the ground, that the Ukrainians are not going to be able to roll back even with all the aid they're receiving from NATO and the United States, which means that the only next step, if we're going to keep escalating, the Russians are not going to de-escalate. The Russians have what's known as the escalate to de-escalate doctrine as well. So both sides are going to be escalating when they should be de-escalating. And what this means is that the likelihood of NATO direct intervention increases, which is the exact opposite of what we want. And in other news, setting up for our next segment with the great Colonel Rob Maness, if we can roll clip number 6, please. Clip number 6. An American was brutally murdered with his Druze family in Syria. The Islamist regime that replaced Bashar al-Assad in Syria, supported nominally by the United States and Israel, but really directly supported by the Turkish intelligence services. They murdered this American citizen. They knew this guy was an American. It's part of a much larger genocide that's going on. Unfortunately, it seems to be that the very regime that was chosen by the West, including the United States, to replace the horrible Assad regime is actually a jihadi force. If you go to clip number 5, it has been said that this attack is a response because of Netanyahu of Israel launching a bombing strike against suspected Islamist targets in Syria. Although, to be fair to the Israelis, I actually don't believe the Israeli strike is what prompted this. I think what probably happened was that the Israelis, who have a commitment to protect the Druze minority of Syria, this is one of the minorities along with the Christians who are being slaughtered. The Israelis are desperately trying to protect the Druze, and I think they detected that this horrible Islamist bloodbath was coming. And so one other thing as well that we're tracking on this show, as you know, clip number 7, Bridge Colby, who is the current Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, he seems to now being surrounded by neoconservatives who want to get rid of him because he is one of the few top America First voices in the Pentagon. There is some issue the neocons have both with Bridges' desire to restrain weapons flows to Ukraine, as well as the fact that Bridge wants us to not focus on the Middle East too much, but instead focus on countering China. So therefore, we have, on top of all these conflicts abroad, we have an internal dynamic which is very unstable and not very healthy for the quest for peace that Trump promised us. Let us hope and pray that things change and that we get peace sooner rather than later, because America cannot afford a war right now. Certainly it would hurt MAGA. Coming up next, we've got the great retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Rob Maness. Don't go away. Don't change that dial. I'm Brandon Weichert in for Emerald Robinson.
Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, and cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. And popping ibuprofen is not a solution to the pain. It's only temporary relief, and it's only masking the true problem, which is inflammation. Researchers are saying to add this Antarctic super nutrient to your diet. I'm talking about omega-3 fatty acids, but not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill. Has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. For a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic Krill Oil for up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/Lindell right now to get your special offer. Whether it's being a weekend warrior or spending time with your family, feeling your best is the key to doing the things you love. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Nirvanta. It's a natural solution designed to help you stay active and live well naturally. Nirvanta is a topical blend of all natural essential oils like frankincense, myrrh, and a proprietary gold standard plant stock extract. It's perfect for your hands, feet, knees, back, or anywhere else that needs a little extra care. Use Nirvanta proactively as part of your daily maintenance routine, and you're guaranteed you're going to feel the difference. Simply massage Nirvanta in for at least 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times a day to get the best results. And if you're not completely satisfied, you get your money back. No questions asked. There's simply no risk and no reason not to try Nirvanta today. Right now, you get 15% off with code Lindell exclusively at nirvantahealth.com. So stop reaching out for that medicine cabinet. Get Nirvanta instead and experience the difference. Go to nirvantahealth.com. Use code Lindell to get 15% off today. Nirvanta Health. Live well naturally.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Brandon Weichert in for Emerald Robinson, who's on assignment in Washington, D.C. She'll be back with you tomorrow. We're continuing with our coverage. As I said before the break, we have a very significant breakdown in the peace, such as it was in Syria. We have, if you roll clip number 1, guys, we have a horrible massacre occurring of not only Christians, but also ethnic minority groups such as the Druze, who are supported by Israel, as well as the Alawites, and now being targeted, the Kurds, who are directly supported by the United States. So you have here, because the U.S., Turkish, even somewhat Israeli-backed at one point, Syrian regime of Jalani, who is an Islamist, they all decided to back this guy thinking he could be better for Syria. And he turns out now that he's doing exactly what jihadists always do: kill the Christians. Go ahead and play clip number 2 if you want. These are more scenes from the horrible events in the region, all of it starting. If you guys also look at clip number 3, you'll see it's not just random guys. This is Syrian security painting their cars over and trying to pretend to camouflage who they really are. They don't want the world to know that it is the government, the new government, the Islamist government of Syria, massacring these innocent people. And so with that, and in fact, if you look at clip number 4, the Druze death toll is nearing 1,000 people, 946 thereabouts as of this weekend. It's only going to go up. This is a tragedy of epic proportions, and it could have been avoided. It's another one of those U.S. foreign policy disasters in the making. One hopes that the Trump administration can reverse this. It needs to be reversed. We're joined now by the great retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Rob Maness, who's going to walk us through this terrible event and tell us what's going on and maybe what can be done. So, Colonel, why don't you just jump on in? What do you think's going on here? Is this an isolated incident, or is this part of a larger sort of offensive being launched by HTS, which is the group that took over from Assad, this Islamist group in Syria?
Thanks for having me on, Brandon. Unfortunately, this is what those of us that have operated in this area and fought the Islamists and studied the Islamists and been on the receiving end of the Islamist targeting have been trying to tell folks is that if you go and you put your political capital and your support behind somebody like al-Jilani and you can clean them up as much as you want and put lipstick on that pig, as the great Governor Sarah Palin said, but it's still a pig, my friend. And I say that in all sincerity. This man and this government that currently controls the state, what was once the state of Syria, is an Islamist state that will emerge and be more deadly and more dangerous for more decades than the Iranian Ayatollah's regime is. And that's where people need to be. Unfortunately, though, we chose the wrong path. And that path has led to what's starting to look like all-out attacks on Christians, Druze, and you mentioned the Alawites already. And they're supported by the Turkish armed forces, Turkish intelligence, the Turkish government. And now they're about to go after the Kurds, who we support. And we have acknowledged there's been a conflict of interest between the support of al-Jilani and the Kurd forces over in the eastern side of the country. And that's also where Americans are on the ground over there. So when they come after the Kurds, they're going to be coming after us. We ought to be thanking the Israeli Defense Forces for doing what they've done already and encouraging them to protect their allies, the Druze there, and maybe even expand their fight and annihilate these convoys that we're hearing about that have been released and freed to move by the government of Syria that are all jihadists coming out of Iraq and the rest of the country.
Now, it's an excellent point. And, you mentioned the U.S. military presence, which is a relatively small footprint, but it is still, it's our special forces on the ground in the eastern part of Syria. In the first term, there was a big fight over whether they should still be there or whether they should be removed. Trump wanted to remove them. I know for a fact that Dan Crenshaw, Lindsey Graham, and Ted Cruz and Rubio convinced Trump not to remove them. So now it seems we've got, I think, like 1,700 of our special forces spread throughout the region, throughout eastern Syria. If the HTS moves beyond massacring the Druze and the Christians, what do you think our response would be based on, the fact that we don't seem to be moving our troops out of the region?
Well, if our troops get attacked, I think everybody could predict what the president's response will be. He's a great commander in chief. He understands what's at stake there. Look, he made the decision to leave those troops there. They're still there in much smaller numbers and have been getting smaller the way I understand it, but they are still there. And if they're attacked, the United States of America not only must respond, we will respond under this president. And it'll be a devastating response against whatever force that's used against us. But the bigger picture is, what do we do with a Syrian state that's more deadly than the Iranian regime mullahs and for a longer period of time? How do we approach it right now and intercept this and deconstruct what is happening so that we can end up with a Syrian state that is more secular, can be prosperous, and not a threat to all of its neighbors and its own citizens? That's the challenge the president faces, and I'm sure he's studying it right now because his eyes are wide open. He's a very pragmatic businessman. He understands what he has, his actions that he's taken so far in this, and understands more than likely what's going to happen if this continues and turns out to be what a lot of us are predicting it to be, a wholesale genocide of all of the minority groups inside of Syria to make it that solid Islamic state.
Well, and I certainly back in December was both on with Emerald and other media outlets. In fact, I'll be on Al Arabiya later today talking about this as well. I was warning about Jelani. He killed American troops during the Iraq War, IED bomb making and whatnot. He was at Camp Bucca for a while, and then Obama pulled us out of Iraq and let Jelani go, who joined the jihad in neighboring Syria. And there's a great picture of him meeting with Trump, and I think in May. The Arafatization of Jelani was underway, where we're trying to make him into this suit-wearing, well-trimmed, Western-looking man. He is not. There was a $10 million reward out for his head. There we go. Until very recently. So my question is, you just said, Trump's studying it. You're the expert here. You served in the region. You're a pretty high-ranking guy, colonel, one away from a general. So you know the area very well, and you know strategy. What would you do to make sure we get the best end result here in Syria compared to what we've been doing?
Well, first of all, the president's picture there, quite frankly, he was right to try to do that, to pull these people into the fold of civilization instead of the 700 years ago tribalism and tyranny and violence that they like to live in these days in the 21st century. But sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The president's only as good as those that are advising him. You mentioned Lindsey Graham and the like, and you mentioned in the break about Elbridge Colby being surrounded by neoconservatives. And if those are the only folks whose voices are getting to the president, his decision making at the core around national security advising from the government folks is going to be colored by that information and the extent of that information. And that's what I'm concerned has happened here. And now the president is going to have to make another move. I would imagine he's probably trying to make contact with al-Jilani right now because we see these media reports, Brandon, about, there's a ceasefire. We've got that. But then you see within an hour or so, the report that the government has told the Islamist jihadis that are coming in these convoys, you're cut loose, to do what you want to do. But the ceasefire is being maintained by the government. So there's a lot of nefarious activity going on here. And the president's going to have to see through that and then make the right calls. If he can't get al-Jilani back on board, I could see that this goes south very, very quickly. But we have a great ally that is well armed, that understands the Syrian government architecture better than anybody else. And let there be no doubt, the architecture that was under Assad is still there. The players have changed at the top leadership levels. So the Israelis are on it. Obviously, they've already struck targets. They're trying to protect their Druze allies in the southern part of the country. And if I were president of the United States, I'd be getting Mr. Netanyahu on the phone and saying, "What's your plan here? Here's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And here's what and coordinating my actions." But obviously, I'm just a civilian. I don't have any idea what's going on inside the government, and I'm certainly not Donald J. Trump. He does things differently than any of us could ever.
That's for sure. Yes, and he tends to be able to win both in business and government when all the chips seem down, and he should get credit for that. My question then is the Israeli factor. So the Israelis are basically our team on the ground. I mean, really, we've got some guys in eastern Syria, but nothing like what Israel. I mean, it looks like Israel is moving in force to help protect the Druze. Something that I've been tracking, though, since the beginning of the response to the 10/7 terrorist attacks, and I talked to IDF personnel and retired IDF people, and there's this kind of strain of concern, which is it possible that Netanyahu is overextending the IDF? Because obviously it is a relatively small force. It really punches above its weight when you think about it, but ultimately there is a limit to what it can do, and it's going into Gaza again, and it's going now into Syria, and they're still doing these things in distant Iran. So as a military professional, are you at all worried about the Israeli defense forces being overstretched and maybe overburdened?
Actually, this is what the IDF is designed to do. Is to fight these kind of actions to defend Israel. And when you combine that with that, the United States just went in and helped them out with the operation in Iran, then you're right. I mean, there are teammates that are on the ground there. The United States of America's military really doesn't need to be involved in this. The air capability, especially the armor and infantry capability and artillery capability that the Israeli Defense Forces has is bar none the best in the region, and is perfectly capable and is full of combat experienced soldiers, sailors, even airmen and Marines now, and they're going to get this job done if they are given the task to do that. And that's the question: is the relationship between America and Israel solid enough now where Netanyahu will agree to do this if he's got the capability and have a real-time, realistic conversation with the president? I think those two need to have that conversation, because this is going to get out of hand fairly quickly as these jihadis come flowing in unaltered, and unchallenged by the Syrian armed forces.
Oh, I agree. And in fact, if you remember in December or last year, toward the end of the year, when the HTS overthrew Assad, I found videos, and I was posting them, of Turkish military officers embedded with the HTS forces, and they're clearly speaking Turkish and issuing orders in Turkish. And obviously, that's an Arab mostly speaking army. So obviously Turkey had direct involvement in many cases covertly with moving those forces into Syria and into Damascus, rather, the capital, and overthrowing the Assad regime. So I guess the concern now is, does this become a proxy war in some respects in Syria between basically Turkish backed forces, which is Turkey's a NATO member, and our other main ally in the region, Israel? And what does that do for the wider geopolitical picture? Is this going to be a problem for NATO then? If we have an instance where Israel blows up Syrian target and they kill some Turkish troops, could this be like an Article 5, incident? Or what do we do? What's the way forward here?
Well, we pushed through it. Look, we had to attack some targets in Syria that killed several hundred Russians. They were mercenaries, but they're really working for the Russian government under contract and those kind of things. And we had to push through it. But the president, that's the president now, didn't hesitate to attack the target because it was necessary to establish stability and hopefully get on a road to peace and protect American forces there. And that's the thing with the Turks, is it's in their interest to have a stable government operating Syria. It's not in their interest for that government to become an Islamist jihadist government more deadly than the Iranian government. And you think about it, with its location, its resources, and the capabilities from the old Assad regime that still exists from a military perspective. It will be a very, very formidable force when it's overlaid with this virulent Islamist jihadist Nazi-like ideology. And the Turks can't afford that. Their long-range goals is to reestablish a quasi-neo-Ottoman empire, from what Erdogan has said. And that won't do that trick, because they'll be constantly fighting their neighbors, and the United States will get involved. And then we have the problem with NATO. And that is a major challenge here. The president's probably been on the phone with Mr. Erdogan, too.
Well, we're going to have to keep our eye on this, because it is only going to get worse. And my personal opinion is Syria as a centralized power in terms of its government is probably not going to be with us after this whole issue is over. It's probably going to be cantonized into several smaller ethno-religious states. That's just my opinion. Colonel Manus of the Rob Manus Show. You can find his podcast. It's excellent. National security professionals like me love it. You can find it on Apple and Spotify, I believe. And thank you so much again for joining us, and we will see you all after the break. Stay tuned.
Friends, we all know the truth. Big Pharma and the federal bureaucracy have made a mess of healthcare in this country, and boy, that's That's an understatement. President Trump signed an executive order to bring prices down, and that's a great step. But we know that real change takes time. There's one pharmacy that is already stepping up. I want to tell you about All Family Pharmacy. They're not waiting. They're taking action now with a summer sale that gives you the power to take control of your health. Right now, through the end of June, you get 20% off site-wide, no insurance required. Did you hear that? 20% off site-wide, no insurance required. They work with licensed doctors in all 50 states, and they ship fast straight to your door. Whether it's ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, methylene blue, antibiotics, emergency kits, or your daily prescriptions, this is a time to stock up. If you believe in medical freedom, if you're tired of waiting for someone else to fix things, do what I do. Take action. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Lindell and use promo code Lindell20, Lindell 20 for 20% off your entire order. That's allfamilypharmacy.com Lindell, promo code Lindell20. Let's protect our families, defend our freedom, and make America healthy again together.
Hello and welcome back to the Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I obviously am not Emerald. She'll be back with you tomorrow. I am your friendly neighborhood guest host, Brandon Weichert, imposing myself upon you only for today. We are now going to talk a little bit about a side of the recent 12-day war between Iran and Israel that is not being widely covered in other media outlets. I've covered it in my column at the National Interest, but it's not really being covered. And that's the current issue where the Israeli military is believed to have used Azerbaijan, which is a neighbor of Iran. They used Azerbaijan territory to launch attacks against targets in Iran during the 12-day war. You'll note this video that's being played here is believed to have been a bomb that was dropped by Israeli Air Force that from warplanes that launched from Azerbaijan. It is believed that many of the drone attacks that occurred that were so successful in stopping the Iranian missile complexes and the Iranian air defense systems from really being effective in the first few days of the war. It gave Israel a window of opportunity to exploit. That came from neighboring Azerbaijan. This picture here is a picture of fishermen recently capturing what appears to be an Israeli Air Force external fuel tank from one of their warplanes in the Caspian Sea. Caspian Sea is on the other side of Azerbaijan, which means the Israeli Air Force was operating, however covertly, from Azerbaijani airspace to attack and disrupt Iranian targets. And what this is really all about, because what we're finding is that since 2020 and 2019, there's been a breakdown in relations between Azerbaijan and its neighbor Armenia. Armenia is generally, they have a large, very ancient Christian population. Azerbaijan is predominantly Muslim, but Azerbaijan is an oil and natural gas powerhouse. Armenia doesn't really have as much of those resources. If you pull up the map for clip number 3, Greg, you'll see the Goicha-Zangezur corridor. And this is basically a pipeline competition that is erupting between the two proxies in what is the quasi-world war or great game for the dominance in the 21st century. And that proxy war is being fought predominantly between the U.S. and its partners, such as Israel and Turkey, oddly enough. Those are very strange bedfellows, especially if you saw that last segment with Colonel Manus. And they're trying to basically build a corridor of energy that will blockade Iran from being able to enjoy what are known as transit fees, because until recently, Azerbaijan has had to move their natural gas and oil through Iranian pipelines on their way to Turkey and Europe, which means they're paying the Iranians to use those systems. The Zangezur corridor is a plan by Washington and Israel and Turkey to allow for Azerbaijani energy to circumvent Iran significantly, which weakens the other side of the proxy war, Russia, Iran, China. So you have here playing out a very complex interplay. And I'm joined now by a former intelligence professional, a friend of mine, Lee Slusher. He's a geopolitical consultant as well. Lee, why don't you talk to us about what's going on in this part of the world, not well known in most American audiences, but it is kind of important and it has a direct impact on what's going on in the wider Middle East?
I think it's best to begin by zooming out a bit and looking at the international trade corridors and what will come of this new Silk Road, with China being the primary producer, goods needing to be shipped to Europe. The war in Ukraine has largely sidelined the northern corridor through Russia, and of course, there's no sign of a thaw in relations between the West and Russia. And the southern route, the ocean route, it takes longer, and also it's subject to interruptions, like we see from the Houthis in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So there's this effort for a middle corridor. And it's gained steam significantly over the past 3 years, again, because of the problems with related to the Ukraine war. And so a portion of that would have to cross this Zangezur corridor that you just noted on the map. So this really is, in addition to all of the dynamics that are specific to the region, that there is this broader geopolitical significance. How do we get these goods from the producers in the East all the way out into Europe and beyond? And so here, the Zangezur corridor is a portion of that. Of course, we have to go back to 2020, to the Nagorno-Karabakh war. For decades leading up to that war, the Armenians, both in Armenia and the ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, had military overmatch. They very confidently controlled that terrain, and they could really put a stop to the ambitions of the Azeris. But with Turkey's help in that war, and using a lot of lessons that Turkey refined both in Syria and in Libya, particularly with drone operations, Azerbaijan was able to flip that on its head. They completely changed the very long-standing military status quo in the region. And then, of course, there was another essentially 24-hour conflict in which Azerbaijan essentially took control of Nagorno-Karabakh. And now there's this relatively narrow strip of land that would link the main portion of Azerbaijan to its exclave Nakhchivan to the southwest. So this broader fight over who gets to control the Silk Road and kind of where it goes. Now, it's also important to note that beyond the South Caucasus, so for example, this middle corridor, it would split in Georgia. A portion of it would go south overland through Turkey. Another portion would cross the Black Sea. Of course, it's kind of planned to go through Odessa, but in Ukraine, but we'll see how that works out with the end of the Ukraine war. And the other potential port is Constanta in Romania, which by no coincidence is home to what will become the largest NATO military base in Europe. So this is a return, as you noted, this is classic geopolitics of the sort we saw to a much, much lesser extent during this brief period of U.S. Global hegemony. So now we have kind of powers fighting over or competing, hopefully not fighting over the region, but certainly competing for it, because the South Caucasus, like the Balkans, like Central Asia, it's a crossroads. And it's a crossroads that offers more efficient shipping, although shipping there would cross many land borders. But so that's kind of the broader picture. Is it's not just there are dynamics in the region between neighbors, between Armenia and Turkey and Azerbaijan and Iran, and of course Russia, which has its 102nd military base located in Armenia, and it has land, air, and air defense assets. So all of there are great powers in the region and other powers in the region that have have interest here, but then there's also that bigger geopolitical picture. So each side there is going to get backing and support to various degrees from countries that aren't specifically present in the region.
That's excellent. Yeah, no, and Lee, and you sort of touching on a lot of stories we've been covering with Emerald on this show. You mentioned Romania, and we've been covering, of course, the stolen election there and how that was contextualized in sort of this wider geopolitical struggle. You mentioned the big base that's the U.S. and NATO are building there. Obviously, I think what you're saying, it sounds like this is actually not even really about Ukraine. It's about creating a hub for this new energy pathway. Would you say that's right?
Energy and other goods and all other sorts of freight. But it's also, like you mentioned, the Great Game. It's about blocking out or trying to minimize Russia's influence both in the region. There are other trade corridors. There's the north-south that goes by sea from India to Iran, and then overland from Iran through the Caucasus up into Russia. So a lot of the tensions, but it crosses through Azerbaijan to get up into Russia. So there's this broader effort to isolate Russia that's been underway for years. So that is also at play here. It's not simply the middle corridor. This, like I mentioned, being a critical crossroads between Europe, the Middle East, and the rest of Asia. It's just one of the most complicated places around.
So do you think, and forgive my naivete, do you think that President Trump is aware of this complexity, or his advisors kind of walking him through this? Is this why he seems to be, in the first segment of the show, I gave a commentary about how he seemed to be backtracking on his promise to make peace in Ukraine. Is this the real reason why the White House is suddenly reversing course? Is it because they're realizing they need to somehow gain an advantage in this great game? Do you think that might be at play?
I assume the White House is well aware of this because the president's envoy to the region recently asked if the U.S. could get a 100-year lease on the Zangezur corridor, and it would then kind of mediate and keep the peace and allow goods to flow through. So I think they're well aware.
Is this America first? You don't have to answer that. But my other question is then. Given the two sides, it seems to be sort of a proxy between U.S. and the West and Israel versus Russia, China, Iran nominally. Which side do you think has the upper hand right now in this proxy conflict?
Well, I think it's what the U.S. would call this new axis: Russia, China, Iran, to a lesser extent, North Korea. It has to do with the ability of the U.S. and its allies or vassals, depending on your perspective. It has to do with their ability to exert their will. And although much of this competition, perhaps most of it, is not military, it's ultimately backed up by military power. And that balance of power is not in the West's favor, in my view. All Western military power is essentially reliant on the U.S. It's the U.S. with other forces kind of plugging in when and where they can. And as we've seen, Europe is largely demilitarized. The Russians have had 3.5 years of practice against Western weapon systems, and they've essentially depleted much of Western arsenals. So that, push comes to shove and the military option is necessary, or at least the tacit threat of military force. I think eyes are definitely opening to the fact that the ability of the U.S.-led coalition to project power is simply not what it was. It's not 1991, and it's not 2003 either. And these other the reason I say I think they have the other hand is because there's this misconception that the gold standard of military power is global power projection, whereas I'd argue it's the ability of a country to defend itself from all threats and to defend its allies in the same way. And Russia, China, Iran, they've all, to varying degrees, but in particular Russia and China, have very correctly identified the asymmetries between their forces and those of the West. And they've built anti-access area denial capabilities. They did not extinguish or offshore their industry, and in particular their defense industry. So they have their militaries are essentially designed strictly to protect their country. So on the one hand, you have this Western expeditionary capability trying to go up against very modern, very advanced militaries in most cases that understand how to defend their own territory. So that's why I would say I think the other side, so to speak, has the upper hand, at least regionally.
And then this is our last 30 seconds. I've been advocating, as you know, for increasing, focus on Western hemispheric defense above all else, maintaining our neighborhood, which we've allowed to be penetrated by everybody. Would you say that's the best way out of this problem set? Instead of focusing on these corridors and distant parts of the world, maybe we should start to retrench a little bit. Do you think that's the solution here, or is there something else?
I think the ideal situation is some kind of grand bargain, and that would involve primarily three countries, the US, China, and Russia. I mean, there would be others involved kind of in an ancillary way, but those three. I don't expect that to happen, but I think that for the world would be certainly the best outcome. And
I agree.
That's how I see it.
And in my final note, I'll say, Randall Schweller has done Herculean work, yeoman's work on the tripolar politics, and him and Richard Roscrans have all found that tripolar orders of the kind you're talking about, China, Russia, the United States, they tend to devolve into world war. So let us hope we can avoid that and get that grand bargain. Lee, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on. This has been very informative. We're going to be right back with our own Allison in the Know. She's going to let us know about the Russia collusion delusion. Thank you so much. We'll be back.
With everybody talking about making America healthy again, I thought today'd be a great day to talk to all my fellow patriots about the importance of making your homes healthy again. Well, we have proudly partnered with airwaterhealing.com and their revolutionary whole home air purification system. The V3 from Air Water Healing does 3,000 square feet of purification. It eliminates dust, mold, viruses, and odors. But here's the part I love. They require no filters to ever be changed and virtually no maintenance. Whether you suffer from asthma, allergies, seasonal bronchitis, or just want to protect your family from the flu or even greater threats, don't wait to get your V3 from airwaterhealing.com today. Use code Lindell for 20% off in savings and free shipping. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com.
And we're back. Thanks again for joining us today. Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. I'm Brandon Weichert filling in only for today. So don't worry, you'll have Emerald back in the chair tomorrow. Let's get to the topic that everybody, at least in MAGA, wants to talk about. It's a topic that I've covered for almost 8 years now in my various columns. It's the Russia collusion delusion. Was Trump a Russian agent? Well, no, obviously not. Interestingly, we now have Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, the first DNI in my lifetime to actually do her job, releasing, if you put up clip number 2, guys, releasing this headline. She went into the files. She gained access to as much as she could from the last 8 years relating to the Russia collusion delusion, and she has found it was an obvious coup attempt by outgoing President Barack Obama. If you want to put up clip number 4, you can put that up. Outgoing President Barack Obama and his chosen successor, his former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. And if you put up clip number 3, you'll see the spread of all of the bad actors: Susan Rice, Samantha Power, James Clapper, St. James Comey of the FBI, John Brennan, all the bad guys. Turns out they're guilty as sin. And it looks like now CIA Director John Ratcliffe for Trump is calling for criminal indictments and investigations into some of these major players who propagated the Great Russia collusion delusion. If you go to clip number 6, you'll see there's a connection here, not just with the Russia collusion delusion, but with those 51 intelligence officers who now we know lied and said during the 2020 campaign that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformatia. Turns out, same people who lied about Trump being a Russian spy lied about that. And lastly, we'll go to clip number 7, the January 6th riot. How much do you want to bet that the same people who lied about Trump being a Russian agent, who lied about Trump supposedly using Hunter Biden's laptop to spread Russian disinformation during the 2020 campaign, also lied about January 6th? And how much do you want to bet the whole end result, the whole goal of this coup d'etat was ultimately to force President Trump out of power and rig the 2020 election? If you pull up clip number 8, please, to put this guy, President Joe Biden, so-called President Autopen, in power. The dots are there to be connected, my friends, and Donald Trump's team finally is getting to the bottom of it. Let's bring in our friend Allison Steinberg. She's standing by. Allison, it's great to see you. What news do you have to add on to the ongoing breaking news that the Russia collusion delusion was in fact a coup attempt by President Trump's political enemies, notably Barack Obama?
Hey, Brand, see you, and you did a great job laying all there. It's been a jam-packed weekend. It's interesting they released this information on Friday. It's possibly the worst day to release information of this level, but it's out there nonetheless. And now what we've had for many years is actually coming to. President Trump actually posted around 2 months ago to his True Social account a meme that said, quote, "All roads lead to Obama, read public military tribunals." So I don't know if he knew was coming out or if this is just, political timing here, but this is incredible nonetheless. We've all suspected this for many years now, but like I said, on Gabbard released a 35-page package which engaged in treasonous conspiracy against President Trump, a coup against President Trump. So I think this is obviously this is really unlike any political hit job in at least our history, and it is incredible. And I guess the question remains, will we actually see action taken and prosecutions carried out? I know Tulsi Gabbard calling for them, as well as some others in the Trump administration, did this rather funny, granted, via artificial intelligence to his true Obama being arrested. But let's take a look.
The implications of this are frankly nothing short of historic. Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue that is so serious it should concern every single American, because it has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. What we saw occur here, as the documents we released detailed, was that we had a sitting president of the United States and his cabinet and leadership team, quite frankly, who were not happy with the fact that President Trump had won the election, that the American people had chosen Donald J. Trump to be the next president, commander-in-chief of the United States. And so they decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do. So creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected, contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously in the months leading up to the election that said exactly the opposite, that Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to try to, quote unquote, hack the United States election for the presidency of the United States. So the effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump, who was duly elected by the American people.
Okay, so that was actually the wrong clip, but that's okay because that was an important clip. That was Tulsi Gabbard, Maria Bartiromo to really break down everything that we're discussing. It's a really great interview. I highly encourage everyone to go watch the full thing if you haven't already. But really love the point that she states this is, not a left nor right issue. I mean, anyone who's concerned with actual democracy and justice should understand here that this is a pressing matter that's got to be, resolved immediately, and that there's literal traitors in our government, operated in our government for the better part of 4 years. So yeah, it's very interesting to say the least. But if we have that Obama clip, I'd love to play it because President Trump posted this on his True Social, and I thought it was hilarious. So.
That's very good. I didn't see that. That's very good. That's very good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it is the real thing yet. But I guess the question remains now: will we actually see the arrests? And what do you think? Do you think we'll see this happen?
Yeah, no, I think definitely there's going to be investigations. My concern, as always, when you have very powerful people, even if they are obvious enemies of the current administration, there always seems to be some out for the elite. And so if Greg, if you want to pull up the headline tear clip number 5, we were tracking this. I mean, the City Journal, Seth Barron in 2017 wrote about how President Obama bought the house in Kalorama, which is a posh Washington, D.C. Neighborhood. He was the first president since Woodrow Wilson to remain in the nation's capital after his administration ended. And we know for a fact that that house in Kalorama became what they called at the time on MSNBC the headquarters of the resistance. And we know that it was a revolving door of John Brennan, Valerie Jarrett, Samantha Power, all of the bad actors. What clip number 1, if you want to go to clip number 1, Trump refers to as, quote, the shady bunch. Well, it's funny, but it's true. There was a real color revolution coup attempt that was being employed by the previous Obama administration to disrupt the incoming, at that time, President Trump. So we really are going to keep an eye on this. My hope is that indictments are coming. My hope is that this isn't the Durham probe all over again, where indictments were coming for 3 years and then they never came. There needs to be real investigations into those people. Furthermore, we need to also have these investigations be the through line, not just for resolving the Russia collusion delusion, but showing how there was a clear attempt from the beginning of the Trump administration by his predecessor to manipulate events so that they would undermine President Trump, and then also replace him, do the switcheroo with Joe Biden, the brain dead auto pen president, by manipulating the election. And they may have even leached the Wu flu from that lab in China, as I posit in my book Biohack. They may have leached it in order to undermine Trump's amazing economy at that time. That, my friends, is the absolute truth. I'm Brandon Weichert. Emerald will be back tomorrow. God bless.